In this video, I'm going to show you how you can map some graphics as a placeholder initially of your cut and artwork accurately onto your model so that all the mapping stays in place when it animates later, which will be in a later video. Right, let's get started. So, from the previous video, you should have your basic carton made up with a single extrude and all the paths for the panels, the axis in the right place, so it will fold as it should do, which is what we want. But we have no thickness to it at the moment, so before we go putting a material on there to apply our graphics, we need to put all the rounding and whatever on there so that when we put the material on, it's not going to get disrupted. So in the extrude, you see if we add any kind of depth to it, it's just going to be a solid square edge thing. But what we can do to give it some kind of reality is with that movement all on 0, it won't actually generate any caps while we put these settings in, which will save the computer a lot of work, so it's not going to be stalling waiting for us to do things. So if we go fillet and cap for the start and the end, these are the settings I've put in here before, which are the ones we want. So I've only got 3 steps on here. I've made the radius 0.2 of a millimetre, so the whole thing will only be 0.4 of a millimetre plus whatever we put in the object menu. Now we need to put constrain to stop it getting larger, otherwise these dimensions will be added outside of our panels, which we don't want. Create single object might be handy in the future. So now if we add any thickness in here, and we'll go 001, so it's negligible but it's there, it will then pop, give us the thickness. So we've now got board with a bit of thickness to it. So when we render, it's going to look like creases and folds. It's not perfect, but it's a pretty good effect for visualization. So now we need to add the material. To do that, double click in the material editor, and because this is just about mapping it, not about the quality of the graphics at the moment, so we're just putting in a really simple, like a placeholder graphic, which I've generated from the original cutter guide artwork that we did earlier. So we've just called this graphics. I'm going to go to the editor here and up the resolution very slightly to 1024, so it's a bit clearer when it's on there. And if we just throw that onto the extrude, you'll see it maps each panel individually, which is obviously not what we want. So what we need to do is to change the projection to flat, and if with the tag and the extrude highlighted, if we go to the texture tool, you'll see that the pan out, see how monstrous that is, that the texture is being mapped towards the Z direction, if you like, and obviously we want it in like -Y if anything. So if we rotate it, I think it probably is going to be -90 we'll put in there. And then right click on the tag and go fit to object. Do you want to use sub objects? Yes we do. And now it is nicely mapped to our model. But if I go back to the model tool here, if we highlight all our splines, do our little folding trick, you'll see that the material is sliding on the surfaces because it's being mapped on the y-axis, if you like, down onto the object. So as it curls up, the mapping stays where it is, which is not going to be much use to us. So let's put that back to 0. before I go on to the next stage, which is going to be to add the material to all the separate panels, and you'll see how that works in a moment, I'm going to make another material for the board, because the inside of the box would normally be blank. It may have printing on it, but we'll just call this board. Save making any more graphics. Might even spell it right. Little treat. So we'll make the colour this brownish colour, which is a bit sicky, but it'll do very nicely. Now we know this tag is nicely matched to the model, so if we copy this, we can then copy the material over the first copy of it, which means the board material is in effect mapped all over it, but our graphics is mapped all over the top. So the graphics want to be mapped onto a selection which is going to be the top and side surfaces. So to do that, we're going to put C2 in here because that's the top cap for the extrude. So we've now got board underneath, and we've got our graphics mapped on the top, but we also want the graphics wrapped around the side. Now to do that, I'm going to Command Shift and copy that tag, and we'll change the C2 to R2, and you'll see it's now mapped around the edge of our board as well, which is fairly realistic to how things would come out if they're creased and chonked out of a board whenever a piece of board is printed. We've got the board material underneath, so it's looking a lot more realistic. But we've still got the same problem. If we fold it up, all these textures are going to slide. Now what we do, I'm going to Command S to save that from this point. So what we do to create the other surfaces, if you like, is if we fold up the extrude, hit C to make it editable. Now what I'll do is in the view menu, I'll unfold all so that we can see what's happened. And we've now got an extrude object for each panel. So rather than having just the splines, we've now got an extrude with the spline under it for each one. And what we want to do is highlight the materials, right click on them and go copy tag to children, and that will copy the tag to every component in there. Now we don't need materials mapped to the splines because obviously they don't have any structure to them, so that's looking messy. So if we highlight a spline, go up to the eye search thing here, double click on the spline object, and that will select all the splines. If we go back to basic here, and under layer, use the drop down to add a new layer. So then we can open up the layer manager, and if we solo the layer, this is just our splines showing, we can then just drag over the materials and delete. I'm going to close the eye, then uncheck solo to bring everything back again, and we'll also get rid of the materials on the null here, the extrude, which is now a null, and the base. In fact, we don't need that extrude null at all, do we? Let's just get rid of that. So now we've got the material mapped onto all the separate panels, and you'll see the effect that has. Now we've got all our splines on a layer, I can hide them in the hierarchy, so we can then very easily just highlight all the extrude objects, go to our coordinates, fold them up, and there we are. We've got the whole thing folding nicely without the graphics slipping on there. So everything's mapped where it should be, everything's folding as it should do. It's starting to look like a proper printed cutter guide. And that's where I'm going to leave it in this one. In the next video, I'll show you how to set up the animation for it. See you then.